Welcome to Pod Zero. I'm your host, Chuck Nice. Pod Zero is a pop-up podcast made possible by the My Weather Radar app and the Union of Concerned Scientists. We can't thank them enough for their support, and we encourage our listeners to support them in return. On this episode, the easiest action we can take in the battle to solve the climate crisis? Vote. It's so easy that only 58.1% of eligible voters cast a ballot in 2016. Since 18-year-olds were granted the vote, the highest showing was 61.6% of eligible voters who showed up in 2008, leading Barack Obama to victory. And since World War II, the highest turnout level came in 1960 with John F. Kennedy's win, when 63.8% of voters participated. Now, maybe you've noticed a similarity between the two highest voter turnouts since 1908. The candidates appealed to young people. Young people have a tremendous power that they seem to hold unaware, and surprisingly, those that would seem to be very smart may be the least likely to vote. In a recent Tufts University study, researchers found that college students in the U.S. overall vote rate was 45%, but that number swings widely depending on personal details such as students' geographic region, ethnicity, and voting method. The data from 780 U.S. institutions and 7.4 million students confirms a sadly continuing trend. College students don't really care about voting in elections. I had to get a better handle on why this might be. So in this episode, I'll be speaking to neuroscientist Dr. Heather Berlin, Dr. Nicholas Christakis, author of the books Connected and Blueprint, as well as his forthcoming publication Apollo's Arrow, The Profound and Enduring Impact of the Coronavirus on the Way We Live. I also spoke to Dr. Eugene Cordero, the founder of Green Ninja, and to kick things off, I thought it'd be good to go straight to the source and speak to a student, so I spoke to Columbia University grad student, climate communicator, and friend, Rollie Williams. Make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel, Climate Town. Listen in. Rollie, my friend, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much, Chuck. And might I just say, I'm so sorry that all of your other grad student friends couldn't do this today. So I'm glad to be here, though.
College-age people, not just students, but college-age people who right now vote at about 44%, which I think is egregious. First of all, do you vote?
Well, me, no. I'm a registered felon. So, yeah, of course I vote.
So
that was the one prerequisite of me being on this talk.
So the study talks about people in your particular discipline. Well, no, I shouldn't say discipline. Your particular study path, which is STEM. Mm-hmm. And you're at Columbia University. You're a grad student there, and you're studying climate, right?
That's right. I'm studying climate science and policy.
So, oh wow! So this is great. You're the what we're talking about here is basically going to shape your life when you leave school.
Hopefully,
yeah, because the science should actually push the policy, right?
Yeah, I mean, ideally. I think the way the system is set up currently, it's more like the money and sort of financial interests push policy. But if we were trying to do things in a way that was smart and numbers driven, then it would be the science that pushes the policy.
That's a very good point. The money does push the policy, and that's why what has to happen. It's funny because it's kind of an echo chamber. The money pushes the policy, but in order for climate, which I believe once climate becomes what it's supposed to be in terms of an issue that we all care about, because right now we give zero, you know what? The truth is we give zero likes. I'll call it zero likes, but we give zero fukes.
That can't be better. That's what makes them say it in their head.
But the funny thing is, let's say we were to transition into a green economy. Now there would be a great financial incentive for policy to then come behind there and continue to push that forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the actual transition to a green economy probably needs to happen with some kind of political help. I just sort of, there's a lot of moneyed interest in the fossil fuel industry right now. So, in order to transition to that, we need to transition away from the fossil fuel industry, and that means we're going to have to figure out some way to get politically active and overcome their political activity.
And
So, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and their money.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sorry. When I say political activity, I mean a giant burlap sack of cash that's being hoisted onto the back of a truck that, drives to a politician's house. Probably not that exact thing, but close enough.
I was going to say, you're not too far off, man.
Yeah.
You really aren't.
I mean, I don't think politicians like burlap as much as I do, but everything else seems right on. Yeah. I think certainly transitioning to the green economy will incentivize listening to science, because we've essentially, fossil fuels are considered a mature fuel. So there's not much efficiency to be gained from using fossil fuels, whereas all of these new fuels, all these green fuels and renewables, and honestly, even nuclear, let's not talk about it because people fuke out about it, but there's so much distance and so much better efficiency we can go with renewable energy. And once we can just get a foot in the door, which is happening now, but once we can really open the door, I think science is going to drive policy to a really successful degree.
Underneath of everything that we're talking about is voting.
Yeah.
It's so one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because I know how busy you are. You still make your YouTube videos, which, what is your channel, please?
Oh, it's called Climate Town. So if you're out there, go to YouTube and type Climate Town, and then potentially scroll past all of the Climate Town Hall CNN videos until you find my video about Climate Town.
Yeah, and they're very funny. The latest one that I saw, I think you do a great job of talking about climate marketing and what I call reverse marketing. Because climate marketing would be what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Trying to get people to understand that this is an existential threat that we all must answer collectively right now. Okay? That's climate marketing. Reverse climate marketing is BP telling you, hey, look at all what we're doing.
Yeah, we're good, baby. BP's got this thing figured out. Don't even worry.
Right, exactly.
The best thing you can do for the climate is get more BP gas, baby.
Exactly. It's like, hey, did you hear about the gasoline we put out with detergent in it? Yeah, that's helping the environment. Hey, do you see that gasoline commercial with all those windmills in the background? It's it doesn't even make any sense. You're actively marketing a fossil fuel by putting up pictures of wind turbines. It's such psychological warfare. It's unbelievable.
And it's it's obvious. I mean, these are things that, so there's this guy I really like, Dr. Jeffrey Supran, and also this amazing newsletter called Heated. But they've been really, and a lot of people on both of their teams and friends and coworkers and even probably bosses of theirs, they've been working to detail the fossil fuel disinformation campaign. And it's pretty crazy. And how many companies, let's say, your local dog food company, or maybe your local dog supply shop, they don't shoot advertisements that are here at Pups R Us, we're good people. Right. We're all really good people and we don't do bad stuff.
Right.
Bing! And then no product advertisement. BP doesn't sell biofuels right now. BP doesn't, they're just pretending that their research is what they do, and their research is 0.1% of their budget, and everything else is all invested in oil. They're trying to absolutely trying to wrong foot you by making you look at one thing while all the while they're doing horrible disastrous things to the earth. And it's obvious, but it's that psychological thing. If you see 100 BP commercials, you're going to be I guess BP is pretty good.
Right.
You know, they have all those windmills in their commercials.
I'm using you anecdotally and making you the not only ambassador but spokesperson for all students everywhere.
Wow. I hope I get a pay bump for this. This sounds like a big job.
It is a big job, man.
Jesus, the ambassador and spokesperson?
That's right. Don't fuke it up. All right. What is it? What do you think when, just anecdotally, when you look around campus and you look at what's going on, what do you think is happening that
coronavirus? Just joking.
that they're not voting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I bet it's got a lot of little pieces, you know, just like any good question, I could simplify it until I'm wrong. And so I will. My guess is, number one, a lot of people don't vote. You know, like maybe 40, the number was 45% of STEM students vote. Okay, I think that's not that far off from American citizens voting.
No, you're right. Americans do not vote. You're absolutely right. Americans don't vote.
But I think part of the problem is that there isn't a premium on voting. Another part of the problem is, especially with STEM students, I've found they're frazzled as hell, okay? They're like, oh my God, I got this class and I gotta do my lab and then I gotta do, oh, my freaking Q lab is broken and I can't get my code to work. And I feel like a lot of STEM students are just burning themselves out and they just don't have time for even doctor's appointments, or they've convinced themselves that they don't have time for doctor's appointments. So I think it's a combination probably of voting not being that valued in America, and the idea that if you don't work yourself to the bone in grad school, you're not working hard enough, or you're going to fail, or you're going to like waste your money. So everything else falls by the wayside: relationships, exercise, and exercising your right to vote.
Ah, I see what you did there. I think one of the other things that was borne out in the study is the fact that STEM students do not talk about politics. They're not nearly as political because of what you just said. Their focus is on their work, their science. And I find this with other scientists too. The funny thing is, I find that people in the sciences tend to not want to talk about politics or be seen as political, because they feel as though, well, politics is something where people take sides. Science is about discovery. It either is or it isn't, and we're verifying or we can't verify.
Yeah, I think that in a perfect world, scientists would be apolitical. I think that in an ideal situation, that there wouldn't be a need for scientists to take a side, because it is important that when you go into an experiment, you are non-emotional about it. You know, you can't want an answer to be one way, or then you could influence it to become that way. That's why you need to do double-blind study. So I think, scientists should be apolitical, but science has become politicized. Literally, Donald Trump 3 days ago said the phrase,
"Okay, it'll start getting cooler. You just watch."
I wish science agreed with you.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually.
I don't think science knows. He said that.
He did.
And it's like, oh, so what you're doing is you're casting doubt on the best tool that all of humanity for thousands of years has developed to figure out how to not die on this planet. The science has become politicized due to corporate interests, right? Like fossil fuel companies literally knew about climate change before 99.9% of scientists. You know,
exactly.
They employed the first climate scientists. They did the first definitive climate science experiments
in the 60s.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, by the way. And I love the fact that you bring this up. science has been politicized because of corporate interests. When science stands in the way of making people money, that's when science becomes politicized, because those people want to make money, and the facts say that they shouldn't be making that money. And so what has to happen? I mean, does science pick a side, or do we figure out where science supports politics, and then that's the politics of science? I mean, I'm thinking out loud here, but maybe you have a thought.
My thought, and this is, I think I either read it in a Catherine Hayhoe tweet or saw it in like an interview she gave or something, but I really think she's right and also the Yale CCC climate change communication department kind of backs this up. The stat that people maybe often don't talk about is that people don't talk about climate change.
Absolutely.
Like in polite conversation. It's just like, I think it's like it's a little bit of a heady issue. It requires some actual work, like to study it and to look into it and to look at sources that are accurate and unbiased. And people just don't do that groundwork. And as a result, they don't talk about climate change with each other. I mean, people don't even feel the need to do the groundwork because they're like, yeah, climate change is real, but they leave it at that. And
exactly. And that's the real problem now, is that what we have is an awareness of the noise, is what I call it. It's an awareness of the noise.
That's beautiful.
So the awareness of the noise makes people feel like, oh yeah, I know about climate. And it's like, no, you don't. Because if you knew about climate, you'd be wanting to do something. And the number one thing you'd be wanting to do is vote. Because that puts people in a position to make changes. People like what you'll be, a climate scientist who is influencing policy, consultant for policy, and finding out the kind of policy that we should have in place to help this issue.
Yeah. And now I think that is right. That is accurate. And obviously the whole point of this thing is to like galvanize people to vote. But I think once you do some of the legwork on figuring out just how bad the climate crisis is, I think it activates you. Voting is going to be the first of 1,000 things that you want to do once you really dig into this thing. I mean, like educating yourself, it does more than just make you want to do the entry level square zero like thing about voting. But once you know more about the climate crisis, I mean, just like read any book about it that's been on the New York Times bestseller list, any book about climate change that's like critically acclaimed, and it will activate you.
How do you, what becomes your driving philosophy to make that happen in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should treat it like it is a homework assignment worth 30% of your grade. Like, I feel like that's really the motivating factor for grad students. It's like, how deeply is this going to impact my grade, and how, like, what's the return on investment for doing this thing? Like that tends to be the thing that makes people activated. It's so easy. You go online, you like go to vote.org, or you just honestly just Google it. How do I register to vote? You get a thing in the mail, or you can just print something out and then you send it in. It's so easy and it's so fast, and like it's your job. It's like you're at an elite institution. I mean, you're anywhere. Like you're like studying science and technology, and it's clear that there is a right choice and a wrong choice on whether science and technology are valued in this country. And by not making a choice at all, you're making the wrong choice.
Wow, that's great. I mean, you couldn't say it better. I love it. Many thanks to Rollie Williams. You can watch his latest video at RollieWilliamsComedy.com. After talking to Rollie, I wanted to know if there was a reason to hope. So I spoke with neuroscientist Dr. Heather Berlin and asked her if I should have hope. It's no coincidence that our conversation circled back to voting. Dr. Heather Berlin is a cognitive neuroscientist and professor of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical here in New York City.
So it depends on how much faith you have in humanity and our capacity to change.
Well, that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. It was lovely talking to you, Heather.
Right.
We are people. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
But if we were to take an optimistic perspective, well, there are a couple of things. One is, yes, change earlier is always better than later, but it's never too late to change. I mean, if you even take something like COVID, right? Like, it would have been good to have everybody wearing masks in February, of 2020. But, now toward the end of 2020, it's still, would be effective if people wore masks. I mean, not maybe as effective as it would have been in preventing this crisis in February, but there's still, a positive outcome. So I think telling, people it's too late is not good. Change at any time is always better than no change at all. But there are a couple of things. One is we give up on targeting individual people and trying to change their neurocircuitry and just vote people in place who understand climate change. We'll put policies in place that will supersede, that will override people's general instincts. That's what laws are in place for, right? That's what a lot of laws are about, overriding what our natural instinct would be, because we just, for whatever reason, our humanity doesn't have the capacity to override it themselves.
Thank you to Dr. Heather Berlin. We'll be hearing more from her in our episode about how our brains process a threat like climate change. Believe me, our brains are no Einstein when it comes to long-term threats. Let's now go back to school and talk to another professor. Dr. Eugene Cordero is the founder of Green Ninja, a climate education program for young people. He also created a climate change curriculum at San Jose State and used it to measure the role of education on behavior. We'll hear more about that in our episode on education, but I had to ask him his thoughts on STEM students' poor voting performance. I don't know if it's a lifestyle, if they're just too busy. Do you have any thoughts on, of course, you haven't done this research, so I can't expect you to give me a reason. That would be stupid. But anecdotally, do you think there's any reason why, STEM students would not be voting?
Well, I don't think there's a good reason, but perhaps being in the STEM field, I felt this a little bit. I studied physics and then atmospheric science, and you're just thinking about science, and this world outside may not seem as relevant. And maybe that's showing us that systemically our education system isn't really providing STEM students with that kind of broad outreach about what are the implications of good science thinking and not good science thinking. Because that's what we're witnessing right now, is that the coronavirus, right? Why is the United States the worst in terms of so many different metrics? Is we have not applied good science thinking to national policies. And same thing with climate. We're not applying good science thinking. So I would hope, that's why my teaching has even changed too. I talk much more about, like, what does this mean for the real world? And what is our role in that? But I think traditionally scientists were told, you're just supposed to do science in a lab and just do that work. And the stuff that's happening around, that's for other people.
Right.
But so, I'm very interested in that study because it has a connection to our education system.
Absolutely. And I'm interested to know how you feel about this. So for the longest time, now I've been working with science and science communication now for about, 11 or 12 years. And in that time, what I have seen is the politicization of science to a degree that has never been. And using science as a means of polarizing the nation. All the scientists that I know, for the most part, have been extremely averse to being political because they do not want their findings to be colored or imbued with the tinge of politics. But that being said, we no longer live in that world. And how do you deal with that as a scientist? And what do we do for those who are coming up behind you, who are being educated? What do we do to figure out Where's the balance? Where's the line? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, great observation. And that's what I was suggesting earlier, that 2 decades ago, we were definitely not to, we kind of, the culture and the social norm for scientists was, don't get involved in politics, don't talk to reporters, don't advocate. And that has really, especially in the climate science area, that has changed. And many of my colleagues are on Twitter, and they are advocating for science, but also for the political connections to science, because this stuff matters.
Right.
And we can't just sit there and say, oh, this is the line is we do our science. It's a personal choice. It's not for everyone, but some scientists are being encouraged to say, you may have to go out there and talk. It doesn't mean you have to completely support a candidate or a position, but we should support sound science, sound data, and good thinking around how to use science to advance our society.
I like that. So you don't have to necessarily be, a political pundit, but you should be considering sound science. And honestly, every scientist should be voting and advocating for voting, because
if you believe in democracy, right?
Right. The leaders that we pick determine, whether or not we are a society that believes in science or that respects scientific findings. Those leaders are in place because we put them there. So that's my wait. There's a star going over my head right now. The more you know. All right. Listen, we gotta wrap. Go ahead.
I know. Can I just tell you one other thing? You know who my favorite, because you like scientists. My favorite scientist for 2020 is Anthony Fauci, because he has done this dance to keep pushing science and the agenda and data, and yet not get fired.
Yes.
And I think it's such it's so interesting, because and that's about science communication. He's had to do that in this very dynamic and unstable world, and yet he wants to. He could have walked away many times. If he had acted certain ways, he was probably guaranteed to be fired. But he did it in a way to keep some science moving through our upper echelons of government, and it's remarkable to see.
Absolutely, and you're right. That's some dance he was doing, and all in the name of science. He was like salsa, merengue, cha-cha, break dancing, pop and lock. He was doing it all. He was doing it all, man. So absolutely. Thanks to Dr. Eugene Cordero of San Jose State University. We'll be hearing from him again. Finally, how can we get young people to vote, or all people to vote? The answer may lie in our sociological evolution. I spoke to Dr. Nicholas Christakis of Yale University. He's author of Connected, The Surprising Power of Our Social Networks and How They Shape Our Lives. He gave me some serious sociological insight into how we might advance the fight against human-caused climate crisis and even get college students to vote. If you can get young people to all say the coolest thing in the world is to care about climate, is that an effective means of getting people to do something about climate?
Yes, I mean, there's a social critic by the name of Tim, I'm blocking his name, I think it's Tim Hoffer. Anyway, his last name is Hoffer, a very famous guy.
Okay.
Who has a saying, which is, when people are free to do as they choose, they generally copy each other.
Ooh.
One of the ironies is that when you give human beings freedom to ostensibly do whatever they want, they typically do what others around them are doing. So we evolved to be this way. It's a very efficient strategy that, so for example, why are we a copying animal? And the core of that has to do with the fact that we are a cultural animal, that we are capable of producing and transmitting knowledge across time and space. So when you are born, you inherit all of the knowledge that has been created by all prior humans. Calculus had already been invented. Cows and sheep and goats and how to care for them, they'd already been domesticated. All the roads had been built and how to build the roads. So you're born today. All that knowledge that had been generated by prior humans is yours for nothing. It's just because you're born today. that capacity for culture is a key part of us as a species. And it relates to this process, which I'll connect the dots in a minute. It relates to this process of social learning. So a little fish in the sea can learn that if it swims up to the light, it will find food there. Most animals can learn independently. That's independent learning.
Mm-hmm.
But we, in fact, the teachers listening to this will know what I'm talking about, but we also do something called social learning, which is that we copy each other. So you put your hand in the fire and you learn that it burns. You pay a price and you acquire some knowledge. Or I can watch you put your hand in the fire and I learn that it burns. I gain almost as much knowledge, but I pay none of the price. That's really efficient.
Wow.
Or you eat red berries and you die, so you paid a huge price for the knowledge that red berries are toxic. Or I watch you eat the red berries and I don't die. So this copying, this mimicry, this social learning is incredibly efficient. And we do it, and certain other animals do it. So elephants and certain cetacean species, other primates, and so on. But we do something even more remarkable, which is we teach each other things. I teach you to build a fire. Now, all of this social learning and teaching, in order to do it, we have to have brains that evolve to care about what other people are doing and to use what other people are doing as a strategy. So in other words, if you're trying to figure out where is it safe for me to pitch my tent tonight, probably the smartest thing for you to do is just pitch it where other people are pitching their tent rather than trying to discover for yourself.
And pitch it in the middle of where they are, so if something comes, they're on the outside.
That's another thing. Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. But the point is, because of this, we copy each other. So this is, of course, you were alluding to teenagers, and I'll come back to it. But
yeah,
why the climate change crisis sometimes is so difficult, because when I'm trying to decide, should I care about the climate, a very natural thing, should I eat red berries? I should look, is anyone else eating red? Oh, they're not eating red berries. Oh, I shouldn't eat them. If everyone else is eating red berries and I'm trying to decide if I shouldn't eat red berries, I'll be like, everyone else is eating them, I should eat them. Same idea applies to climate change. You're thinking, should I be worried about climate change? And you look around, no one else is worried about climate change. So you're like, well, I won't worry. That is a very rational thing to do most of the time, but certain kinds of problems, like these long-range, very major problems that affect us all, like climate change, are difficult challenges for those kinds of brains. But the flip side is, once people start worrying, just like other fashions, when it becomes fashionable, then the whole herd, will move. So I think if we can get a critical mass of young people to care about climate change, then I think more and more of them will care.
My thanks to Dr. Christakis, whose new book, Apollo's Arrow, The Profound and Enduring Impact of the Coronavirus on the Way We Live, hits book outlets this October 27th. Again, thank you to Dr. Eugene Cordero, Dr. Heather Berlin, and Rollie Williams. Thanks for listening, and until next time, I'm Chuck Nice, reminding you that outside of survival, there's no reason to listen to scientists.